Now, after Christmas, you're going to be taking a look at the scenarios that you can use within your controlled assessment. So one of the things that I thought would be a good idea is I've mocked one up and showed you what the mark scheme was looking like so that we could get an understanding of all these different processes that are involved. So if I describe this to you in the way that I'd read through the scenario you get first, you might want to read through it 3 or 4 times just to make sure you understand what's happening. Because as we start to compare it to the mark scheme, it becomes a little bit more obvious in everything that you're going to have to produce to get as many marks as possible. So in this case, we're going to look at a card game, and we're just going to start out by looking at the design. Now, you're aiming for these 3 marker points. It's pointless aiming for 2 marks just because you're a C grade candidate and all that sort of stuff. You want to aim for the top as much as possible. So I've got a blank document and I've copied and pasted, it's too small there, the criteria for the first part of the design. You have to show evidence that you have a thorough understanding of what the problem is, or what is written in the scenario, and reference near enough all of the user's needs. Now, I can probably forgive 1 or 2 things that are missing out, so I can still give you the 3 marks because it does say almost all, but you're going to want to try and get as many as possible. Now, I can't see me commenting throughout the whole of this video, otherwise I'm just going to be reading out what I've got on the page, but you're going to be using the scenario, which you'll probably have in paper form, so you can highlight it, you can annotate it with notes, you can take a look at everything that's required from this project. It's an important step, and if you get 3 marks for just showing somebody that you understand what you've read, it's a good 3 marks to complete and to get in your bag before you even start the programming section. So in this case, the maths teacher really wants his students to be able to play an electronic card game. Kind of like the Play Your Cards Right, if you've ever seen it. If not, I'd suggest a YouTube search so you can see a clip of it. Basically, you get an upturned card, so you see the face of one card, and there's normally a row of other cards that are turned face down, so you can't actually see what the card is. Now, based on the card that's first turned over, you've got to guess whether the next card that he turns over is going to be higher or it's going to be lower. So say it was a 5. You're more than likely to say, well, there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen, King. So there's 8 higher cards, and there are actually only 4, because I'm going to take ace as lower in this case, I think, lower cards. So your probability choice would be to go for higher, because it actually comes on through. Now you'll notice for this one, I'm just stating bullet points to begin with, what the students will have to actually be able to do. So this maths teacher wants these students to be able to play this game. So they're going to want to be able to start it. Pretty poor game if you can't start it. You've probably seen where the data flow diagram is going to go with this one. You're going to want to be able to see the initial card and the next 4 cards, because it talks about the program which shows 5 backs of cards up to the screen and generates the 5 cards at random. I'm just interested in what the student's going to have to do, so I'm not worried about the generation of random cards at the moment. The student's going to have to be able to choose whether the next card is higher or lower. Probably, as it says on here, we're going to need 2 buttons to display that one. But at the moment, I'm just looking at everything, get my punctuation right as well, everything that the student will have to be able to do. So the developing of the program, it's not being that one, but I do want the student to be shown the next card. So they'll be able to see the next card and be able to be told whether or not they were successful or whether they were incorrect. Now at this moment it doesn't give me the actual messages to use. I'll probably put that as part of my planning later on. Now, will they need anything else? The trouble you'll have is, and I must admit this is one that I've made up, it's based on a scenario that AQA came up with, but it's not the exact one. I can't use that one, sorry. And I've minimized it a bit, so I haven't got a lot of the detail in that the other group had. So it does raise a few different questions, because when you read through a scenario and you've got a list of things, you might be starting to think, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't answer everything that I might need to know about that program. And the more you can ask questions at this stage, the better you're showing the examiner, or in this case me, since I'll be doing the first marking of it, that you thoroughly understand it. And we're reading it straight from the definition of the 3 marker, the thorough understanding of the problem. So this doesn't tell me whether there'll be 1 incorrect guess and then it ends the game. It doesn't tell me whether or not the student will be allowed to play again. So it doesn't tell me anything about a repeat. It doesn't tell me whether there's going to be a score kept or a displayed probability. I'll use tallied there. Nice posh word. What else doesn't it do? There's a few different things. Alright, it gives me the cards, so I don't have to create the cards, which is always quite useful. There it is, done there. But it only gives me the suit of hearts and the back of the card. You can see my drawing skills didn't leave a lot to be desired there. Alright, let's have a look. So, it only gives me the set of hearts, so I don't know whether or not we're going to have to future-proof it to be allowed to have the other suits as well. I've got to be honest, if we're looking at the fact that the maths teacher wants us to develop the understanding of how to play cards, that all 4 suits should be there. I did think of another one. Will there only be 5 cards shown? So one of the things that I thought about, well, the specification definitely says there'll be 5 cards shown. But actually, is there any scope for later on having more, or like an endless mode or something? So now I've asked my questions, and I might think of more as I go along. I want to discuss each one of them, because I want a definitive answer as to what is actually going on with this program. What is actually going to happen? What does the user need? So if there's only going to be one error and it's game over, so the user guesses higher on a 5 and the next card is a 4, does the game just stop? Does it say incorrect, game over, and you immediately lose? Now, at this point it's worth discussing the fact that this says saying an incorrect message, but it doesn't say whether or not it is that's it, that's game over, well done, or in this case commiserations. Now you can, at this stage, because you're just designing a solution, talk to the people around you. You can take the scenario home and ask as many questions as you want to anybody at home that might be involved in actually helping you design this program. You can ask, in this case, I'd ask a maths teacher. If there's maths teachers being referenced in your actual scenario, you're going to want to talk to people. So I'm going to reference that. I'm going to say that while looking at task 5, they get a message saying that they're incorrect. But actually, I've talked to other students who will be the main audience for that game. I've talked to my maths teacher, which, okay, it's not the maths teacher in the scenario, but it's somebody that could help you decide what that maths teacher is after. And they'd like to actually store the number of incorrect guesses. The idea behind it is that you can then generate the probabilities, which, as it states in the scenario, they are currently studying probability, where GCSE maths tests like to include questions involving probability of cards. So the more that you can feed in that probability knowledge, so how many correct guesses, how many incorrect guesses, what the probability of them getting their next guess is correct, you're actually helping them develop their probability skills as well. But you need to explain this clearly to the examiner, so you're saying your thought process as you go through. They're not going to take marks away from you because you've discussed it at this stage, because this is your design. This is your understanding of the scenario and how you want to progress with it. Now, you might choose, no, one guess and it's all over. As long as you say why, you're still meeting that need. You're still saying, well, actually, if they get an incorrect guess, I'm going to get them to start over with the 5 backs of cards. The only time that they win is if they get all of them right. And that is your choice. If you can back it up with, well, actually, I discussed it with the students, and as much as I want to calculate the probabilities, perhaps I'll calculate the probabilities of them getting the game right all the way through first time. So again, if you're looking at the next question, will the user be allowed to play again? There's nothing in the scenario that suggests that actually they can't or they can. So it would be your choice. As you're thinking about these ones, you're thinking about your decision, you're thinking about what other people might want, and in fact, since it's aiming at students, you're probably one of the target market, especially where it's GCSE maths and you're going into your GCSE maths present. So if the aim is to get somebody to practice with their cards and practice with the probability, the idea is, well, on my thought process anyway, that actually the more exposure they get to them, the better it's going to be. So you want the game to be repeatable. Therefore, they should probably have the ability to play again. It's a bit like when we created Hangman and we gave them the opportunity to play again as one of the extras to it. Okay, this is where I can talk faster than I can type, obviously. And I am trying to improve my VCOP as I go along, so my vocabulary and my punctuation and how I'm actually getting my points across. So you'll notice as I go through that I'm also varying my sentence starters. So I've got for example and looking at and in discussion with, and by doing this there is no. I haven't yet, or I've got one set of brackets in there. I haven't got any commas. Oh, I have got commas. I haven't got colons or semicolons at the moment, so I'll be looking to improve that later on. But I am explaining how this sort of measures will help. So it will also help support the previous decision, as probabilities could be generated and stored based on the results. And another set of brackets I think will work well there. I know I'm talking very fast, but luckily it's a video and you can pause it. I'll give you a copy of the document as well as I go through, but I'll attach it to Edmodo so you can get it from there. Will the score be tallied as they play? I kind of answered that question above now, so I could take the question out. However, it kind of makes sense to answer it formally, as that was a concern that you had right at the beginning. So with nothing in the scenario concerning the score, you can see I'm thinking about my punctuation as I go through. I have been deciding whether or not this would be a good idea. And we've kind of decided, yes, having a score would be brilliant because it would help discuss the needs of the probability, to help discuss it within a context as well. So if the math student can see how their probabilities are affected by their guesses, it's going to help develop that understanding of probability. Probably would be a good idea to include the formulas and stuff as well so that they could practice those, but that is not within the scope of this card game at this moment in time. Might put it in the introduction. Okay, let's have a think. You'll notice how I'm using the sentence if time on this case. We've looked at the software development lifecycle models, and some of those do tend to take into account the fact that you can improve them and you can maintain them and you can add extra features as you go along. The score as they play isn't part of the main scenario, so what I'm thinking is that that is more of a future development. So if there is time to do it, brilliant. It would add an extra feature to the game and it would make it a more complete game. However, because it's not in the scenario, I am not worried about it if I don't actually find time to add that in. I will within the next part of my design, so I know that I factored it in and what I want to do with it. But I'm not going to specify it here as yes, I will definitely do that. There will not be a problem with it. Okay. I also like the idea of a high score system. Can you imagine on a game of higher or lower that you've got a tally of different names of people that have beaten your game? You'd really want to beat it. You'd want to be the top person on that scoreboard. So keeping a record of how many they've got right in a row, and then you get to put your name as soon as you've beaten that high score. Sounds like an amazing feature for this one. Again, it's not in the scenario, but actually reading around it, if you're asking people to practice with it, it would make more sense. Okay, so will another suit be needed to add to a later date? So we discussed this earlier, I discussed this earlier. If the main aim of this project is to get pupils practicing, I use the American spelling? I'll check my dictionary afterwards, but I think it should be RE. Practicing with the playing of cards, you'll want to have all 4 suits eventually. So whether it is a combination of you get to choose how many suits you've got, whether it is because if you imagine you're only getting to choose higher or lower, but if you've got 4 suits, you could have the same card. There's nothing stopping with that one. That brings up another question actually, so I might add that one in at the end. Will there only ever be 5 cards displayed? According to the scenario, yes. And the specification says definitely shows 5 cards. However, if you have a chat with other students and you have a chat with your maths teachers, I realise it's easier for me since I am a maths teacher as well, actually being able to have possibly 2 modes might be effective. So you've got a mode where you've got those 5 cards. Brilliant. That's a short fire game to practice your use of the probabilities and the higher or lower aspect of the game. But there could be something like an endless mode where you can completely keep going until you get a wrong answer. At least then you might get the opportunity to have the other suits involved as well. You'd be really unlucky then if the next card was exactly the same. Now, I thought of a question as I was going through, will other suits be added at a later date? If you're having a look at adding an extra suit, you'll have 4 aces, 4 twos, 4 threes, 4 fours, and so on and so on. So it would make sense to not allow the repeat cards or not allow duplicate cards, because otherwise you could have, even just with the 1 suit, your 4 cards could end up being 4 of hearts. It's a random occurrence, and because we're going to end up using random for this one, it's going to make sense. But if you had 4 of hearts, you've got no way of winning the game because you can only choose higher or lower. There is time. Again, I'm going to do this as an extra because it won't stop you playing the game. It would just make some levels or some random choices impossible to gauge. So we could allow them to choose it right at the start. So say there's an introduction screen as this is what you're going to do. You could be given a choice to say allow repeats or no repeats. And you could actually talk to your maths teacher, or if you remember it from last year, the 2 concepts are called mutually exclusive and inclusive events. So if it's an inclusive event, it's going to go straight back into the pot so you can use it again and again and again. Or if it's mutually exclusive, every time you take one out, you can't use that one again. So it could allow the teacher to expand it to kind of additional areas of probability and the terminology that you're going to want students to practice as well. Again, I realise it helps that I'm a maths teacher at the same time, and I realise it helps that I looked at the scenario and made it up as well. But in conversations with other students, in conversation with teachers that it would concern in this case, your scenario could infer that parents wanted a revision tool that they could use at home, or let's have a think. Teachers wanted something to use in class to represent something. There is nothing stopping you from going and having a chat with those people. Take questions that you've got, write answers down, or even just saying, look, I've got to write a program that does a game like Play Your Cards Right. From a maths teacher's perspective, what would you want to see? Give them a little time, give them scope to think about these problems as well, because the more time you give them and the more time that you talk to them, the more detailed your solution will be. Again, then you can quote them directly within your design to make sure that you can show that you thoroughly understand what the problem is and have gone that extra mile to find out more information. Okay, so we're also talking about terminology being developed, which, as you may have guessed, literacy skills, either speaking or written, are all things that we're looking at throughout school at the moment. So have I just shown a thorough understanding, and have I referenced all the users' needs? I'm just going to tidy up this document. Next video, I'm going to tell you how many marks we've got for it. But if you go back to the start, you'll be able to look at the marking grid. How many marks do you think I've got? Do you think I've got 3 out of 3 for the just understanding of the problem? Or do you think I need to go back to the drawing board with anything? I've certainly written a lot. That's 583 words. If it gets 3 marks, fabulous. Good luck, and over to you.